Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Amy Schreiber.
And I'm Hillary Zwallen. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries.
Hello, everyone. Today, we are thrilled to have writer and advocate for the glories of being female, Lisa Lister, to discuss menstrual magic and unlocking our cyclic superpowers. She shares womanly wisdom about our cycles as a means of purification and self-knowledge, her own experience reconnecting to her cyclic medicine, and how the womb space is a medicine bowl or place of alchemy and creative potential. She also discusses the value in reclaiming the names of our lady parts, different ways to show up as a woman in charged times, and allowing the divine to move through us in her own unique way.
You guys, this is a good one. This is such a good one. So a little bit about Lisa. She's crowned the Defender of Female Awesomeness by Cooler Magazine. Lisa Lister is a writer, a menstrual, fertility, and reproductive health practitioner, and founder of She Flow, a personal invite to celebrate the fiercely feminine, sensual pleasure of being a woman through yoga, movement, massage, mysteries, and magic. Lisa is dedicated to helping women crack their lady code, reconnect with their body wisdom, and love their lady landscape. You guys, isn't that that's such a concept? Like, what? Love your lady landscape.
That's what we need.
Revelatory for me, at least. Amy and I have often talked about how we were raised in a very religious upbringing, just very disconnected from all of that. So you can find her on Instagram at Sassy Lisa Lister. Website is thesassyshe.com. Patreon as the She Power Collective. And she has also written amazing books, which I think we've read all three of these, Witch, Love Your Lady Landscape, and Code Red. So I'm so excited for you guys to listen to what's coming up.
Yeah, so much great wisdom about beautiful, messy stuff that has been shoved down and demonized. So very informative, very amazing. This is a little bit different than most of our episodes because Hillary started interviewing her. And due to technical difficulties, we had to stop and reconvene at a later date. So luckily, though, we both got to interview her, which was an amazing experience for both of us. So that was fun.
We were both very excited, having both been really excited about these books. I swear, it was like 6 or 7 months ago, Amy, right? That we were like, we have got to have her on our podcast. Anyway, you guys, this is serious wisdom. If there was ever an episode that I would say share with your sister, your best friend, your mother, your daughter, these next 2 episodes, this is part 1.
Yes.
These are the episodes that every woman needs to listen to, really. I mean, this is serious. This is serious reclaiming, you guys. This is serious stuff. So yeah, so without further ado, let's get into the interview. What do you say?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining with me today. I have to tell you, I read your witch book about 6 months ago, right after I came home from a trip to Rome that just felt very transformative for me. And I was so into researching Mary Magdalene. And for some reason, your book kept coming up and being suggested. And so I got it on Audible, and I was standing there at my sink with like tears in my eyes, listening to the first 2 hours of the book, because your voice and your words and everything it was such a feminist battle cry. And yet it was done in such a way that was so, it was just so, it wasn't angry. It was like this, it was touching, it was truth. So anyway, I'm so thrilled you're here with me today, because then of course I've read Love Your Lady Landscape and Code Red. And I feel like everything that you've written about is so important for women, and not just like in general, but right now, it's so relevant right now. So with that little acknowledgement, thanks for being here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Deep, deep bows for receiving the medicine. I'm grateful. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, great. So today our episode, you're welcome, by the way. Today our episode, we are focusing on cycles as our superpower. And Amy and I wanted to do a little series just on life, death, rebirth cycles, and then the cycles of our bodies. And after I read your Code Red and your Love Your Lady Landscape book, I have been relating to my own menstrual cycle in such a way. Normally it's like this really huge burden. And it's something that I didn't realize until I read your books, how disconnected I was to the process. And so I just wanted to have you talk to our listeners and a little bit about harnessing the menstrual magic, and what is it like working with your cycle instead of against your cycle?
Right. And so that working against us piece, don't let that be another thing that we beat ourselves up with, right? Because this is like such a beautiful opportunity for us to recognize that our menstrual cycle, just like the lunar cycles, the cycles of Mother Nature, the cycles of the seasons, the cycles of the cosmos, are all intrinsically linked and are all part of our magical powers. Except that so many people have, and when I say so many people, I'm talking patriarchy and patriarchal systems, right? The systems that have been put in place have taken those powers, those cyclic knowledge of ours, and they've put them in the dark. And then they've made us be very afraid of the dark and our connectivity to our bodies, to our menstrual cycles, to the cycles of the season, have all been made like taboo. So when we talk about menstrual cycles, so many of us are in a place of pain and discomfort and disconnection because we don't know the power that is held within them. And so our menstrual cycle is this incredible reflection of the lunar cycle, and as above, so below. And in our bodies, we hold these codes. We hold these cyclic codes, and the menstrual cycle is a beautiful tool if we let it. And I totally get anybody that's like hearing this and going, seriously, Lisa, there is nothing beautiful about my menstrual cycle. Like, I get that. Like, I was that girl too. Like, please, no, I was that woman. But when you recognize that each of, like the moon phases, each phase of our menstrual cycle, and we do have phases, it's not just about the time that we bleed, each of them holds superpowers. So each of those phases holds a superpower in which we are able to come into a deeper connection with our body. So it becomes a map. Our menstrual cycle becomes a map of self-knowing that unfolds and unravels with each and every cycle. So every time we bleed, we're having the opportunity to open up to another layer of our own self-knowledge. And then when we know that, we don't need self-help books. We don't need people telling us how to show up. We start to recognize the cyclic nature of our body, and then we start to recognize it in the moon, and then we start to recognize it in our surroundings, and then we realize that we are we are in direct connection, and we are the direct reflection because we are her and she is us.
Yes, that is such great wisdom, Lisa. In your books, you talk about your own personal body experience and how disconnected you were from your own body, and kind of what was it that led you into this women's work. Talking about our cycles, writing about the cycles, the work that you do, which is so much more than just that, but really awakening women to the nature of their bodies and body acceptance in regards to not only just kind of the blanket phrase self-love that we see thrown around out there in the world, but really like from this cyclic approach that I know for sure has resonated with me and with Amy and with anyone else who I've shared your work with, by the way. I think, so talk to me a little bit about your process in moving from what we talk about in terms of like these kind of masculine business world that we live in into doing women's work.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not something you sign up to at your careers advice, session when they're like, yeah, what do you want to do when you grow up, Lisa? Yeah, I want to work with women and I want to talk about vaginas and periods a lot. So that's, that's because that's pretty much what's happened. So I was working in a job that I loved, but it was super fast paced. It was, it was in TV here in the UK, and I worked in TV and magazines. And what I was realizing was that I was living from the neck up. So I was completely disconnected from my body, had no clue what was going on down there, for example. So, and I say that firmly with my tongue in my cheek, I talk about vaginas and wombs and blood all day long. So, but at that time, that's what I would have called it. And I know it's what so many other women talk about it. They speak about their own lady landscape in like hushed tones, and there's a concern about that because we are so disconnected from it. And I was disconnected because there was pain. I wasn't connected to my body. So then I started to experience pain, like fierce pain and deep pain down in my womb space. And then I began bleeding more days than I wasn't. And I had to change jobs. The job that I loved became no longer possible because, I was turning up to interviews with pop stars and I was bleeding on sofas. I was bleeding through my clothes. I was bleeding onto sofas like a really nice PR girl when I was interviewing this like really big band at the time in the UK. She was like, excuse me, you've got a situation. And and we can all relate to the shame and the embarrassment that comes around even speaking about our period, let alone like bleeding in front of people and then having to figure out how you're going to get from one place to the other. And so there was all of that stuff that came up. And I was in a relationship that wasn't working. I thought he was my forever love. He absolutely was not. And we all would probably have an example of that in our lives too. So what I now recognize was, which I thought was just really bad bloody luck. I was like, why is this all happening to me? And, I was going to the doctor, I was saying like, what's happening here? I don't know I just want this fixed. Like, why can't we fix this? What's going on?
Right. Give me a pill, make it go away.
Right.
Because that's how we do it.
That's the world we live in. And it's what we've been taught.
Yes.
And so I wanted to fix the problem and I wanted to just get on with my life. I don't understand what this is. Anyway, I went to the doctors one time after many, many, many months of misdiagnosis, and the doctor, dude in a white coat, said, oh yeah, we know what's wrong. You've got endometriosis and you've got polycystic ovaries. And so for a moment, I was like, yeah, okay, good. Finally, we've got a diagnosis. Great. What's all this about? He then started to talk about wombs, and then he talked about uteruses, and then so that in that breath, I was like, whoa, stop. So what? But both of them are in trouble? And he was like, what do you mean both of them? I was like, well, my womb and my uterus. You're talking about my womb and you're talking about a uterus. Are they both in trouble? He was like, you've only got one. And at the time, I was 26. I was 26 years old. I did not know that my womb and my uterus were the same things. Which is just craziness in the grand scheme of things, but it's a reality. It's a total reality for so many women. And so he then, in all of his, loveliness, which was very little, by the way, went on to say, well, you're not going to be able to have children, so we might as well whip it out. And I was like, whip what out? And he was like, your womb. I was like, okay, so first of all, I've only just realized that that I have a womb and that my womb and my uterus is the same thing. Now you're talking about whipping it out. Okay. So when I left that doctor's surgery, he was, he had given me like a pamphlet, just one pamphlet about what it would mean to have my womb whipped out, as he so eloquently put it. And in that moment, I felt like this deep, deep pull in my womb space, which wasn't the same. It wasn't the same pain that I had been experiencing. It was a very different pain. It was like a more of a, I don't know, like it, I mean, I know it now to be what I call she, like it was my voice. It's my deep voice from within me that was just like, no one is whipping anyone out. She was pissed. She was angry. Yes. And what I now recognize is that it was my call. It was my call inwards, like come into your body, pay attention, like stop being up in your head. Like, you've changed your job, like you've created a freelance career so that you can kind of maintain this current way of life. But like, what kind of life is this? Come into your body, come down, and we will start an adventure together, exploring what it is to love. And, love is such a big word. And so for many people, I do just say, like, let's just explore our lady landscape. Let's just get to know her.
Let's just acknowledge that it exists in a way that isn't completely disconnected from our own bodies. Yes, exactly.
Exactly that. Exactly that. And so that has what's led, is what's led me, my own adventure into healing and to acknowledging her existence and then being able to work with her and then recognizing these incredible superpowers that are held in that space, and then getting really angry for a big part of the time, recognizing where so many of us have been disconnected and kept from this knowledge and our mystical mysteries. These are ours.
The anger word is really interesting because I'm with you. I've similar situation in terms of just, I didn't have PCOS and I didn't have, but just disconnected from my body.
Sure.
I never even, I was always just like, why do I feel crazy? And then it would be like, oh, my period would start. Or, I was only connected to my cycle in a way that it was a burden, that it was annoying, or in the way that I was trying to not, either not getting pregnant or trying to get pregnant or what, it's just in terms of procreation or just functional, like dealing with this mess that comes every month. And as I read through your Code Red book, your Love Your Lady Landscape book, there really is this, like, it's almost like a rage deep within of like, how have I not looked at myself like this? How have I not connected with my own body in this way? So talk a little bit about how we can work with this cycle in a positive way, in terms of, in your book, you talk about it being the first half of the month being a breath in and the second half of the month being a breath out, and really viewing the 28-day cycle or however many days your specific cycle is. I know not everybody's exactly 28 days, but looking at that holistically, can you kind of explain that to our listeners for a moment?
Of course. And so let's just keep it like really basic. So as you said, that we have this roughly, and we talk about, every woman's cycle is individual. So know that, what may be 28 days for some people, maybe 36 for another, maybe 16 for another, or any variation of that.
Right.
So even the marking a date in your diary as the first day that you bleed, like, so when you first recognize blood, put a little spot in your diary and be like, right, okay, and then just count the days from there. I share lots of cycle kind of tracking, but ultimately this is as simple as it needs to be, is to just like mark it on your diary, mark it on a phone app, just so and then you can count the days. So first, that's a beautiful place to start, and then we start to recognize that the cycle is split into two halves, which is more of a masculine energy and then more of a feminine energy. So the first half of your cycle, just after you start bleeding through to around the time that you ovulate. So that's roughly day 14 if you have what's, in inverted commas, a normal cycle. So that first half of the cycle is that in-breath. It's very masculine energy, and it's the kind of energy that we're really used to working with in the outside world, right? So it's energy that we recognize in our society because it's quite masculine, it's quite linear, it's quite straightforward. It's like you've got a lot of energy, your hormones are rising, so you're able to do a lot of things. So it's a very doing energy. So it's like the maiden and it's the mother in terms of the archetypes of woman. We have these women that are doing women, like they're growing,
they have lots of energy, they're young, They're vibrant,
there's a real vitality about them. There's a real ability to show up. So, in this first half of the cycle, we can show up in a way that feels very okay with the outside world. So then after ovulation, so we have this ovulatory period, and ovulation is when you're most fertile. It's like the same as when the moon is full. It's a very big energy in your body. Then there's this, what happens is the exhale happens, and this is much more feminine energy, and this is a coming home to yourself. So, the first half of your cycle was going out in the world. The second half of the cycle is an invitation into your body, into your own self. So
let me just interrupt really quickly on that, because when you say the words coming home to yourself, I feel like in my own body, I just take an exhale. Like I've never I dread the second half of my cycle.
Yeah.
It's like this thought of like, oh no, here it comes. It's going to come. And what do I do? How do I handle this? And just hearing you say those words, like, this is when you get to return home and go inward. It's like the hugest shift in thinking about self and about cycle in a way where it's like, oh, wait, I'm going to learn things about myself. I'm going to get to know what's really going on here, rather than, oh, I'm so emotional. I'm so out of control. Anyway, I just wanted to interject before you move on there.
And it's a beautiful recognition, because it's where we receive. This half of the cycle is where we are open to receive. Yet, as women, we've not, we barely put ourselves first. The idea of receiving, of replenishing, of all of the words, like reassessing.
Yes.
And it's our own retrograde in a sense. We come into this feminine energy, and we're not used to it, because that kind of energy is represented in the archetypes of woman by the wild and wise woman, by the crone. Now, in society, those women are seen as dangerous, right? Those women are seen as, or they're completely invisible.
Throw them away.
Yeah.
They're of no use now. They've lost their beauty, or they're not fertile, or whatever. And not that I believe that, but I see that collectively, and I'm like, Continue. Sorry.
We see it in everything, because we live in a world where it's all about that maiden energy and that mother energy, where we're of service there. Like, oh, they're sexy, they're beautiful. Oh, now they provide, now they provide and produce babies. Oh, what do they do now? Oh, now they get opinions. Now they get wise. Now they get wild. Now they get a little bit dangerous. Yeah, we do. And so that's happening in every menstrual cycle, right? So every cycle we get this opportunity to come in and recognize ourselves. And when we don't recognize that, our hormone levels are dropping, so we can't do as much as we did in the first half of the cycle. When we talk about wanting to be the same as men, like, we're just not, right? So, like, let's celebrate that. Let's recognize that our energies ebb and they flow for a reason, so that we can be out in the world, and then we can also come in and replenish and serve ourselves, so that we can then serve the outside communities and our families and each other. But first of all, there always has to be this space where we come inwards. And if we're not acknowledging that, that's where the pain happens. That's where all of the PMT, the PMS is coming up, because we're suppressing feelings, because we do get a little wild in this area. And I understand it's like, it can be seen as dangerous, but if we haven't even recognized this about ourselves, then we don't know what that energy is. So sometimes it can feel like repressed anger. It can feel like, and sometimes it is. Or it can
I love
feel
that.
like
You said that in Code Red. You talk about that in this kind of autumn premenstrual phase of our periods, that anything that we could have, that maybe bothered us during phase 1 and 2, but we were like, oh, no big deal. Like, I'll just push that down. I'll just shove that down. And not deal with it right now, because I'm in a place where I'm busy and it's not bothering me. Like, you can't push it down. When you put it in those terms, because I think I've had so many arguments with my own husband during PMS, and he's like, don't you realize, like, this is never an issue until like these 4 days or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but it's an issue. And he's like, yeah, but it's the PMS. And I'm like, no, like, when I read those words, I was like, oh, that's what's happening. Is I'm like, it does kind of bug me in these other phases, but I just don't allow it to, it's
your
just
tolerance
like,
is higher.
It's not worth arguing about it because I'm just busy, but it's like, no, it still bothers you. It's just now it's in your face and it has to be dealt with. So I love the idea that it makes that having that thought in my mind helps to think about being more conscientious and aware during the first 2 cycles of, like, not just letting things go because you have energy to deal with it,
Yeah.
So then in your menstrual cycle, when you get into your PMS, you can be like, all right, I'm taking my space, I'm taking my time, I just loved it. I thought that was really revelatory for me.
Perfect. And because this is why we have this cycle, so that we can have these phases where in each of them, so that first half of the cycle we spoke of, that's our that's pre-ovulation and that's ovulation, and that's high energy, that's masculine energy. And then the second half has these other two cycles, these other two phases, which are pre-menstruation and menstruation. And so that pre-menstruation phase is our edit phase. That is the time where everything like that will show itself. And this is why we get this opportunity, because we are, able, when we bleed, when we move into the menstruation phase, to release, to let go. Like the part of us that's been told that that's dirty. Are you kidding me? It's purification, right? So it's total purification for your body. You are releasing, and what's held there is emotions. Is what's held there is everything that's unfolded within the previous menstrual month. And it's available to you with your bleed to release. Now, if there's pain and there's heaviness, it's then as we start to work with each phase and recognize the powers that are held within each, we also recognize the hot spots, so that when it comes to bleeding, that pain can be recognized, and we'd be like, oh, so that pain is attached to that time when I didn't show up for myself, or when I said yes to a thing in my pre-ovulation phase, because I was like, yeah, I'll do all the things. I'll take all of the social engagements. I'll say yes to everything. And then except we said yes to that thing, not knowing that in 2 weeks' time, we would be in our premenstrual phase, which is when we want to come in and very much less likely to want to be so out in the world. So we then start to manage our energy, and we start to recognize that, of course, we live in this world. So it's not quite in the space yet where everyone's in recognition of these cyclic powers and this our own cyclic nature. And we all cycle at a very different time. This would have been much more easier in the time before light, and the time before the pill, and the time before we were medicating. So, there was medication in our water supplies, so there's lots of things that mean that we all cycle at very different times. But understanding that there are phases in which we move through each and every menstrual month allows us to have this map, and it's available to us to show us what is happening in our body, so that we can then start to make choices. We can then start to plan based on how we show up, how our body shows up.
Thank you so much for joining me again here today to finish up our talk on cyclic superpowers.
Yeah, of course. I'm very excited to share.
Okay, so Lisa, in your conversation with Hillary, you left off discussing getting in touch with our cycles as a means to navigate our lives more skillfully. But beyond scheduling, you talk about the cycle and womb space in your books as this powerful entry point into our own wisdom. And you describe the pelvic bowl as a cauldron.
Yeah.
I love this. Can you please expound on this metaphor?
I just see it as a medicine bowl. It's our space of, whether you have a womb or not, that space is potentiality, as above, so below. So this is almost like the reflection, not almost, it is the reflection of the cosmic womb, where we have no thing. And in no thing, there's this infinite possibility of what can be created. So I always see our womb space as a place of potentiality, of potency, where we can, and womb space, so the medicine bowl, there's the space that holds the womb, the ovaries, our creativity. It's all potential. And so whether you choose to birth a baby, whether you choose to birth ideas, books, creative projects, anything can be birthed from this place. And when we remember that, and for me, it's also where we connect to source. So it's where I connect to source. People say, oh, I receive downloads. For me, I receive uploads. She comes from the earth and she moves up through that womb space and she is there. And in that space, we can alchemize too, because we hold, like we have the cauldron and we have this medicine bowl. It's where we can hold everything. We're women, we can hold a lot. And so that includes trauma and pain, and that also includes joy and pleasure. And so it's the possibility in that space to be able to to alchemize that pain and that trauma into joy and pleasure by really connecting with her and acknowledging her existence. Like for so many of us, we don't even acknowledge that she exists, so coming down into that space,
Right.
moving her daily, touching her, tapping her, but allowing her to move and be, and to do the work that she is capable of doing for us and with us.
Yeah, I love that cauldron, that medicine bowl metaphor, because I think you found a way to redeem these two female specific topics that have been demonized in so many ways, like women's medicine and women's bodies.
Right.
And that's one thing that really has impressed me about your work. And I think you touched on, I've been thinking recently about the power of language and acknowledgement and the words we use, the power they have to shape our stories that become our culture and our experience. You chose really beautifully and unapologetically to name your book Witch, which is a word, which is a word along with all the various names for the female anatomy, like pussy, for example, that have been used as insults in our culture. So can you talk to me about naming and the reclaiming these words of our lady parts and why this is important?
And it is a reclamation, it really has to be, because if we are ever going to remember, like fully remember our potency and power, we have to look at all the places where those words that were ours, they were ours and they've been demonized and taken from us. And so we have to look to all of the places, periods. We have to look to, pussy, to all of the witch and the slut and the whore and look back to all of their kind of origins and recognize that these were, whore was a sacred word. It was super sacred. And the same for witch. Witch is, from my knowledge base, is that it's from an old English word called witcher, which was wise woman. It was simple as that. It was a woman who was wise. And so witcher, and so witch became witch. And then witch was then used as if you had a black cat, or if you didn't have a baby, and if you weren't able to make babies, you were obviously a witch. Or so then it was used against us. So the wise woman became, and her power became, a woman to be feared, because you weren't doing what you were supposed to be doing, right? So and so then that's when the witch trials began, and that was demonized, along with our periods and anything that created our power that we connected into to remind us of our connection to source and to nature. We were disconnected from it, and it was called taboo and dirty, and we've been taught to be ashamed, and we've been blamed for so much because of that. That this reclamation for me is so important. Is such an important part of this next step for us as women. Is reclaiming our parts and recognizing that we can all, in whatever form woman looks like to us, be able to take back our power and support others if their version of what a woman is looks different to ours. And their version of their truth is different to ours. We don't have to like each and every person. We don't have to like each and every woman in our sisterhood. But, we have been turned against each other for so long now that the reclamation has to involve us having some fierce compassion for ourselves as we navigate this terrain, but also in support of our sisters who are, exploring this terrain too. And it may look very different to how we are.
Right. I think you posted on Instagram around the Kavanaugh ruling, and I think you gave such a beautiful example and a reminder that there are different ways to show up as a feminist during these charged times. And that's so important to remember, that whenever these collective triggering events happen, we all ask ourselves, like, how am I supposed to show up? And you gave this amazing reminder that, like, you're supposed to show up how you're going to show up. It's going to be different, There's room for all sorts of responses.
There really is. That's it, that there is room, and that we have to create space for there to be, for for the responses. And then there has to be a response too. You know, I think social media has created a reactionary element to our nature. And, you know, I write in all of my books really about the kind of bitchcraft and the anger and the wild woman and that part of us, which I am so wholeheartedly in support of us, again, reclaiming and witnessing. But as she hasn't been recognized or acknowledged for so long, therefore it's going to cause some friction as she appears in our bodies and in our society. And so, you know, what I'm recognizing over and over again is that we have to practice a little bit of discernment with that. And I'm not trying to silence anyone. Absolutely the freaking opposite. You know, I want every woman to have a bloody voice more than anything in this world, actually. But in order for it to be of service or to be useful to ourselves more than anything, is to really trust that however it moves through us is how it is for us. So some people will be activists and will want to shout out loud about it, whilst others will turn to art or will need to retreat a little bit whilst they take on board exactly what this means before they choose to share their expression of their feelings in the world. And so we have to, I mean, the biggest part of this is just respecting and honoring each other in that, because that can look a million different ways. And I think social media creates this kind of echo chamber of noise, and it's so noisy and it's so reactive. And I mean, it's got lots of good points, but I also am recognizing that, especially in, you know, if you're not doing it this way, then, you know, you're not doing it right. Or if you're not doing this, then you're not a feminist. If you're not doing this, then you're this. And it's people's anger. I get it. It's and it's an expression, but is it serving? Like for me personally, and this is very personal, all I see is like, let's create. The biggest change we can make as women is to create. We are creatrixes. And like I say, go back to that medicine bowl, come back in your body, and then create from that space. And like whatever moves through, you know, let that be the potent change in the world. You know, let that be what is able to move and create ripples in other people, rather than pointing fingers, telling people they're doing it wrong. But I also get that's how these times are. And so I think being able to open up your third eye and witness it all is a really great practice in these times. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really important aspect of all the anger, that when things have been repressed and hidden and shoved down for so long, like all these shadow aspects of ourselves, they become a bit of a monster. So it's
for sure
to recognize that is an important step in being able to act purposefully and intentionally in these times versus the reactionary insanity.
Absolutely. And I write in the books, and I'm only speaking specifically about women remembering who they are, you know, and I'm saying that she, the great goddess, the great mama, has been underground for so long, and she's pissed. So she's moving through us. And so what we're experiencing is what she's been experiencing. You know, she's not been anywhere. She's not, but, you know, I kind of think, like, when people say, like, the goddess is rising, I was like, well, I mean, yeah, she is, but also she's always been there. She's just not been listened to. Like you say, she's been pushed down. She's been kept underground. It's not like, you know, it's not a, so actually now, as she's rising through us, not necessarily like she's rising, like she's always been there, but like through us in our bodies, as we remember her, as we remember us, as we remember who we are, that then creates definitely an anger and a frustration and a need to want to express that. And it's the how, and like that's messy, and you know, the whole for me the whole kind of feminine experience is messy, and that's the part that they've tried to keep contained. They've tried to contain us so that we're not messy, and actually that's where we come up. You know, that's where the rub is, and so that can get quite explosive. And it's just, for me, I'm just really witnessing when women are turning against women, and that's just not okay. Like, we don't need to call each other out. We really do need to, I mean, again, I don't want to tell you what to do. That's definitely not what I'm doing. But like, I really think we should call each other in and support and nurture find really beautiful ways in which we can do that, as opposed to it being, like she's doing it wrong and that's not right.
Yeah.
No, who knows? These are new times. These are new times we're navigating.
Exactly. Yeah, well, the spectrum of possibility is really wide in that whole realm. So it'll be exciting to see the ways that we can show up to support each other through this, because like it can get really terrible. It's going to be beautiful, like ultimately, I think.
I agree. I totally agree. And it can only get that because love will win out, but we have to create our own space in that, and to create space in ourselves in order for that to move through us. And because we are such incredible vessels of the divine, of power, of she power, it's like, well, we can do that. We can create space. We can alchemize this pain and destruction in our bodies first, because that's where the trauma's been held. And then that will ripple out to the collective.
Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.